The Yellow Tooth Adventure. Chapter 2.
At the stop, 2 nanoseconds into the wormhole, David ordered, "Dale, full sensor sweep, everything we're capable of." "How long will that take?" Dale's reply was,
"Give me 2 hours, Captain."
After 3 hours, David called, "Dale, talk to me." He replied,
"Sir, I have 6 objects in sensor range, but I can't believe what my sensors are telling me."
"Tell me what it is," David demanded. Dale replied,
"Sir, it looks like 6 airplanes. Prop-driven aircraft, like from the 1940s, 5 TBN Avenger torpedo bombers, and 1 PBM Mariner, a flying bomber boat. The pilots are waving at us."
David scratched his head. "Give the coordinates to the teleporter. Get the pilots aboard." Soon the teleporter room had 27 airmen aboard, confused, hungry, tired, and scared. David ordered that the airmen be given cabins, told how to use the replicators and allowed to rest. David asked O'Reilly whether the ship could take the aircraft in tow and return to Sector 00. O'Reilly said they could put the 5 Avengers in the shuttle bay, and the Mariner could easily be towed to Earth. David said, "O'Reilly, wait until I give the word." He went to the cabin of one of the Avenger pilots and entered a cabin. "Lieutenant, I'm Captain David Stevens. This is my ship, the USS Constitution. Are you the flight leader?" He replied,
United States Navy Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, flight leader of Flight 19.
David said, "We will return you to Earth, but I need to know whether your aircraft has any explosives aboard." The pilot shook his head.
No sir, we were a training flight, no bombs and no ammunition.
David said, "Please tell your fellow pilots." Then David asked where the pilot of the Mariner was billeted. And the lieutenant indicated the cabin next door to the right. David entered the cabin next door. "Lieutenant, are you the aircraft commander of the Mariner?" He replied,
"I am."
David said, "I'm Captain David Stevens. This is my ship, the USS Constitution. You, your crew, and your aircraft will be returned to Earth, but I need to know whether your aircraft has any explosives aboard." Again the lieutenant replied,
"No sir, no explosives or ammunition. We were a search and rescue mission. We were sent to find Flight 19. The next thing we knew, we were aboard your ship. What's going to happen to us, Captain?"
David replied, "We will take you back to Earth and see that the US Navy is given its men. But you should know that many years have passed since you disappeared. After that, it will be up to the Navy. We are taking your aircraft with us so that the Navy will have its torpedo bombers and the Mariner back. Relax, Lieutenant, it will be 10 days before we get home." Out of the wormhole, David contacted Admiral Marovich and gave him the information about Flight 19, the Mariner, and the airmen he had aboard. The Admiral contacted the United States Navy and informed them of the impending return of Flight 19, the Mariner, and all the crewmen. The Admiral asked where these sailors should be deposited and was told to return the men to the parade field, Naval Station Norfolk, Virginia. Additionally, the U.S. Navy asked for the approximate day and time of the return of the crewmen. During the voyage to Earth, the Navy crewmen and officers were given a tour of the unclassified areas of the Constitution, entertained in the Halo chambers, fed replicated meals, and shown to the ship's gym. At the time indicated, David, Larry, and Admiral Sims saw the seamen off, observed their reception at Norfolk, and then returned to their mission of finding Admiral Yellow Tooth. 3 nanoseconds into the wormhole, the ship came to a stop. David sighed. "Dale, talk to me." Hank turned.
"Captain, something is pinging off our hull like bullets."
Dale's voice came over the comm.
"I'm not sure of the caliber, but a flight of Japanese Zeros is strafing us."
David commanded, "Shields up. Tal, hail those Zeros. Larry, talk to them." Tal and Larry reported.
"There's no response from the Zeros."
David replied, "Well, let's teleport the men to the ship, gather them together, and you can talk to them," Larry said.
"We'll have to teleport them to some safe place. We might have to fight them."
David responded, "O'Reilly, I need to secure the shuttle bay. We may be fighting in there." O'Reilly replied,
Aye, Captain. The shuttle bay will be ready for your flight in 20 minutes.
"O'Reilly, I want to teleport the pilots of those Zeros out there directly to the shuttle bay. Is Shirley up to that?" O'Reilly replied.
Yes, sir.
David told Larry, "We'll take our personal shields and wait for the pilots to arrive. You're our interpreter. Let's go." After about half an hour, The pilots began to arrive in the shuttle bay, scared, combative, and not willing to listen to Larry. David had been right on. These pilots began to fight, drawing their sidearms and shooting at the two spacemen. There were 10 Zero pilots, each seemed to be adept in karate. David had to draw on his skill in the martial arts to defeat the pilots and disarm them. As David subdued each one, Larry stood over them and told them, in no uncertain terms, to stay down, or they might die. Finally, Larry convinced the pilots they meant no harm and would be taken home to Japan as soon as possible. The pilots were assigned cabins, 2 to a cabin, and Larry told them how to use the replicator for meals. The flight leader asked to speak to the captain and was introduced to David.
Lieutenant Osakama, Captain David Stevens of the USS Constitution.
The lieutenant spoke with a very cultured Oxford accent.
Please, Captain, would you tell me what has happened to us?
David sighed, I wish I knew. First, you and your flight were engaged in a war. You were flying somewhere. Then you all were here in this wormhole light years from where you had been, preserved for hundreds of years until we happened along. Something woke you, and you did as you had been trained, you fired upon this ship. We did not want to destroy you, so we brought you aboard and will return you to Earth. We will be your hosts for about 10 days, then, you will be back in Japan. The lieutenant nodded.
Thank you, Captain. Thank you for not destroying us. We shall behave peacefully.
As the Constitution drove toward Sector 00, they received a call from Admiral Marovich, Captain Stevens, the Japanese government does not want those airmen returned to Japan. I have arranged for them to be accepted by the Swiss. David responded, okay, Admiral, we'll take care of it. David and Larry discussed it and decided, the Japanese will receive and honor these airmen, or else. David and Larry teleported into the Japanese throne room and approached the chrysanthemum throne. Larry spoke in Japanese, translated.
King, we are returning 10 valiant pilots to you. You will honor these courageous and loyal pilots, or we will take them to Switzerland and tell the world about your rejection of your heroic soldiers.
David called the Constitution. O'Reilly, teleport those pilots to my location. 10 men in the uniform of Japanese Imperial Navy aviators appeared before the throne. All 10 men dropped to their knees and saluted the Emperor. Larry stepped up to the throne and whispered in the Emperor's ear, translated.
You have better damn well treat these men as heroes to be celebrated as the finest men of your country. Get my drift, bud?
The Emperor nodded and said to his courtiers, translated.
Set a banquet for these fine airmen. And a public reception for our returning heroes.
Larry smiled, translated.
We'll be watching.
David and Larry returned to the ship to return to their mission, finding Admiral Yellow Tooth. 4 nanoseconds into the wormhole, the ship came to a stop. David called, Dale, what do we have here? He replied,
I don't see anything. Give me 2 hours, and I might have something.
An hour and a half, the Admiral's voice came over the comm.
Captain, it seems that we have nothing in this nanosecond.
Davis shrugged. Computer, move the ship. He was interrupted by a voice.
Captain, this is Crewman Winters. There is something here. I can feel it.
David said, Winters, you and Lieutenant T. Sun, reach out and tell me what we are facing. She replied.
Aye, sir.
And she went to find Lieutenant T. Sun.
After about 3 hours, Crewman Winters and Lieutenant T. Sun asked to speak with the captain.
Captain, there is something here. We will need Captain Sorenser and Commander Trank. Like we did when we confronted the Green Cloud.
David ordered, Larry, get Trank, and you 4 try to find out what we have facing us. He replied.
Aye, sir.
12 hours and an exhausted 4 intrepid crewmen returned to the captain.
Sir.
Larry began.
We have beings of pure energy stuck here in the wormhole. They need help escaping.
David agreed, bring them aboard. Lieutenant T. Sun replied.
It's not that easy, sir. They need to be held in, I don't know, stasis, otherwise, they are just sucked out of the ship again.
David thought, it seems to me all we need is a Faraday enclosure. They would only be held away from the effects of the wormhole for a few nanoseconds.
So Larry, coordinate with O'Reilly and these people, and let's get them out of the wormhole. O'Reilly needed to know how much space these people needed so that he could build the Faraday enclosure for them. It took O'Reilly's people 16 hours to create the enclosure. Lieutenant T. Sun and Crewman Winters coordinated the transfer of these energy beings into the enclosure. David asked. After we get out of the wormhole, then what? Larry replied.
Once they are out of the wormhole, they will be able to take themselves just about any place.
Which way do they want to go? David wanted to know. Larry said.
Back the way we came.
Out of the wormhole, the energy beings expressed their gratitude to the ship's crew and left the Constitution to continue the search for Admiral Yellow Tooth. David ordered a return to the wormhole, and 5 nanoseconds and the ship came to a halt. David called the sensor lab. Dale, is your wife there with you? She responded.
Yes, I am. What can I do for you?
He replied, I believe I need to sit down with all senior officers to discuss this situation we're in. And I would like your input as well, but you're an admiral, and I can't order you to attend. So, I am offering you an invitation. Please meet with us in, say, an hour. She replied.
Aye, Captain.
Then to Dale.
Darling, what you said about Captain Stevens was right on. It's so good to allow such a man to be captain.
In the conference room, David presented what he saw as a situation. The wormhole is 16 nanoseconds long, that's 16,000 microseconds. The wormhole is about 90 million light-years long. Each nanosecond then is about 5 to 6 million light-years long.
It would take millions of lifetimes to search the length of this wormhole. We are finding entities lost in the wormhole every time we stop. We have done a lot of work with the people we have rescued so far. But, then, I'm afraid, we have no idea if what we have done so far is good or bad. Comments. Dale commented.
Captain, we have given people back their lives. That one fact negates any adverse effects.
O'Reilly said.
Captain, changing lives and allowing the person to live as they see fit can only be good, even if they choose the wrong paths.
The Admiral remarked.
Captain, this is what the Navy is all about. People. Next time we are out of the wormhole, we should talk to Admiral Marovich about this mission.
David said, we will continue on this mission until we have input from Admiral Marovich. But I want you to talk to the crewmen in your sections. Please pass along any ideas. Dismissed. As David and Larry entered the bridge, Dale's voice came over the comm.
Captain, I see a ship. It seems to be a flying ship, but not the Admiral's.
Tall said.
Captain, we're being hailed.
On screen. On screen, the crew saw a familiar form, that of a flying dragon. The dragon spoke.
Identity yourself.
David responded, Hail Captain. I am Captain David Stevens of the USS Constitution, United System Federation Navy. Then, from the other ship.
Where are we?
David replied, Captain, we are in the Gavergan wormhole. We have found many parties stranded here and helped them find a way home. May we be of assistance to you and your ship? Larry walked toward the view screen and began to speak in the flying language, translated.
We are not your enemy. We are allied with the flying civilization and are helping others lost in the wormhole to get home. If you allow us to help and follow us, we can introduce you to a flying fleet only a few minutes from here.
The captain of the flying ship seemed to be impressed with Larry's command of their language and idioms and, consequently, decided to trust the Constitution and her crew. Larry told the helm to leave the wormhole through the De Vega end. Once out of the wormhole, they hailed the fleet and turned the lost ship over to the Commodore Blue Tail. After a short discussion with the Commodore, David directed the ship to return to the wormhole, 2 nanoseconds in from the De Vega end. After arriving at the designated time spot, the ship's hull took a terrific thump before any order could be given. David ordered shields up. Looking around the outer vicinity of the ship, they saw what resembled a humpback whale on the view screen, black with white splashes around the fins and belly, about 35 tons, 56 feet long, and apparently sleeping. Then around the whale was a pod of whales just sleeping. The whale that the ship had bumped into woke and began to gasp for air. David ordered, extend the shields around those whales and pump air into the space we made for the pod. After a moment, the whale began to breathe and calm down. David ordered, Larry, get your team together and try to communicate with those whales. Larry called Commander Trank, Lieutenant T. Sun, and Crewman Winters. They donned their environmental suits and went outside to talk with the whales. The four, joined and held together by Commander Trank, reached out to the whales and were able to communicate with them.
They're from Earth, sir, and they would like to go home.
David called O'Reilly. O'Reilly, we have about 10 humpback whales that need to get back to Earth. Can we maintain our shields in the present configuration and pull those whales along at UL-16? O'Reilly replied.
Difficult, Captain, but if we employ our tractor beams and shields, we would have to reduce our power demand inside the ship. But, 10 days, we just might be able to do it. First, of course, we would have to recycle the air out there so that the whales get home alive.
David ordered O'Reilly to engineer the system to get the whales home. It took the engineers 20 hours to put everything in place, and then Larry's team went out and explained everything to the whales. After that, the Constitution exited the wormhole and headed toward Sector 00. Admiral Sims had coordinated with Admiral Maravich about getting the whales into the sea without dropping them from a high altitude. She transmitted videos, including the approximate size and weight of each whale. Upon arriving at Sector 00, they found that Admiral Maravich had 10 cargo shuttle crafts fitted with extra strong shields and tractor beams and had these crafts rendezvous with the Constitution to receive a whale each to be carefully shuttled down to the sea, just inside the San Francisco Bay, giving an hour between each whale. Larry and his team told the whales what was going to happen. And like every good plan, it did not go off as hoped. The whales had to be set in the Pacific Ocean within minutes of one another due to the stress and limited oxygen available to the shuttlecraft. Lieutenant T. Sun reported to the captain.
Captain, the whales asked me to relay to you their eternal gratitude for their rescue.
David asked, "Are you still in communication with them?" She replied,
Yes, sir.
He asked, "Would you please relay to them my best wishes for their life and health?" She responded,
Aye, sir.
Admiral Maravich teleported to the ship and requested a time to address the crew.
You have been of immense value to the lives of others, the NXC Grandville, Fly 19, the Japanese pilots, the flying ship, the whales, and the HMS Hood and her crew. I salute you, Captain Stevens, and every officer and crewman aboard the USS Constitution. I can think of no greater mission. I know that might seem to be the same thing over and over again, but the lives you have changed and thus you will change our efforts. I will task the USS Bismarck and the USS Painter to relieve you in the next several months. Thank you and keep up the good work. Marriage out.
In a meeting with the senior officers, the Admiral addressed Larry.
Captain Sorensen, your new ship will be commissioned in 6 months. It is the first of a new line of dreadnoughts, the USS Bradley. David, you're stuck with him for the next 6 months. You might consider just who your new first officer will be.
David replied, Aye, sir.